Hello, my name is Joseph Daniel Ganci. You might know me as J. Dan Ganci, my nom de plume. I'm the author of Gideon, The Sound and the Glory. It's an Old Testament epic novel. And what makes it an epic is because it's generational. So there's a lot of information that I cover in in a short period of time is to make it reasonably accurate. And the way I write is that I take the Bible narrative as it is, and I connect up the dots between point A and point B, which stays the same as it's stated in the Bible, with details of understanding. I've been graced by God with discernment. When it first happened, I was kind of surprised because I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing, and why would he give it to me? Because he uses the foolish things of this world to confound the wise and the weak things to confound the mighty. And you get to the point where this information just keeps coming in. As I knock, it opens. As I seek, I find. But there's a lot of work involved in doing this, a lot of research. And of course, 1,000 years hence, the anthropologists will conclude, as a society, they all commune with an all-knowing oracle named Google. I know that's kind of glib, but the idea is that we didn't have this kind of access to this deep wells of information before. No one had that. I mean, you'd have to go to, libraries with dusty manuscripts and be with scholars and all that to gather this kind of information at a touch of a button. How amazing is that? This is God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. Now, Gideon, The Sound and the Glories, I started out, people would say, Joseph, you have a very glib way of speaking and a good vocabulary and interesting thoughts. You should write a book. And I really had no interest particularly. I've done some poetry and I did a couple short stories, but I had never endeavored in a novel, which is quite the undertaking. And finally, my granddaughter, Claire, who's, I think she was in the 5th grade or 4th grade at the time, she turns around and she goes, Papa, you need to write a book. And I thought that was interesting that you would say, out of the mouth of babes. And I was reading Gideon, and I've read the Bible cover to cover. I'm on my 8th time cover to cover on the Bible. I read it twice a day, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. I seek him early, and I go to bed with the scriptures in my brain. So over the years, things start to coalesce. So I'm reading the chapters 6, 7, and 8, the 3 chapters, and they come to 8, and it says something interesting. He's captured the Midian kings. He's conquered the Midian Empire. And he's captured the kings, and he's draying them around like, as a trophy to show people that he had won. Otherwise, they wouldn't have not known. And he did what he needed to do with them. He showed them. And then he's on his way home, and he didn't want to spend the resource or the guards to do them. He had nothing to do with them. And he said something curious. He said, I would have kept you alive, but you killed the sons of my mother, even my brethren, at Tabor. And I go, at Tabor? That just popped out of nowhere. So I Googled it, and the Battle of Mount Tabor, Judges 4 and 5. So that one word, Tabor, gave me my first 7 chapters, which was very provocative and interesting. That's Deborah, the prophetess who lives under the palms. Barak, the 10,000 men, the 900 chariots of iron. This was the beginning of the Iron Age. The Hebrews had bronze swords, but the chariots of iron, this was new. The Kenites were the smithies. As a matter of fact, Harosheth, where they built the chariots, were called Smithy to the Nation. And then I had the Jabin king of Canaan, which is interesting. I had spied on Netflix one time, and this is how God works with me. And I'm watching just because I'm interested in archaeology and anthropology, and the anthropologist can't figure out how Joshua killed King Jabin and Barak kills King Jabin hundreds of years apart. How did that happen? Well, the thing is, his name is not a pronoun. He's not King Jabin. He's the Jabin Canaanite king. It's a dynasty of Jabins, which means wise man or discerner. And that's how that was put together. So now there's a blood feud involved because now the Midian kings killed his brothers. So now he's chasing the kings down the Jordan. There's another battle. It's in the novel. There's another full battle, the big battle. Gideon isn't even in there. And I had come across it on the internet. Some scholar said, gee, I can't believe no one ever mentions the main battle. And I started piecing the puzzle pieces together. And yes, there was a main battle with Ephraim as the head of that battle. Well, Ephraim wins, cuts off the heads of the two Midian princes, Oreb, and Isaiah talks about the rock of Oreb in chapter 10 of in the Bible. And so when he says the days of Midian, he's talking about Gideon. And Gideon is chasing the kings down, and he comes to Ephraim. Ephraim is waiting for him at the Beth Barah. And the Beth Barah is the only fording place of the entire Jordan River. No bridges. So when he says take them to the waters, that was common knowledge back then, that the waters were the shallow waters of the Beth Barah. That's the only place you cross. So they meet him down there, and they don't follow him. They say, no. He pacifies them, their anger for not being invited into the first battle. They're upset about him, but he pacifies them, and he says, hey, you guys you're the warriors. I'm just really a smoke and mirrors kind of guy, and I could use help going after the kings now. And so they had no food. And I'm going, well, why didn't they ask Ephraim once he pacified him for food? And Ephraim doesn't give him any food or go with them, right? Because they were mad they didn't go to the first battle. How come they're not following the kings, follow the money? Because they didn't have any food to give him. He had no food. They had no food either. And they didn't go with him because they had no food. They weren't going to go out into the wilderness, a whole army without food. And Gideon crosses over with his 300, faint, but pursuing. And he pursues the Midian kings up to a place called Sukkot, and they turn him down for food, which was a surprise. Sukkot, like right now, we're having the Jews are having the Festival of Tabernacles, which is Sukkot. And it's the whole deal of Sukkot is about the stranger. As we were strangers in the wilderness of the desert, today we remain strangers in the wilderness of life, and we're guests of God. So going there, Gideon's figured, well, as a guest, they're going to open up and feed us. They turn him down. And so next they go to Penuel. Penuel is an interesting place in the sense that Penuel, there's a huge tower there that they venerate. And Penuel goes back to Jacob. It's the exact place, and that tower they built was a memorial to where Jacob wrestles the angel. Later, Gideon wrestles down the tower because they refuse him food as well. And the reason they do that, because they think these 300 starving guys are not going to conquer the Midian Empire. And then once they find out that they helped their enemy, they would be held liable. And they didn't want to take the chance of upsetting the Midians in a day of reprisal. So the story of Jacob, Gideon tells him in the novel about the story of Jacob, which is in the Bible. And the story of Jacob is real interesting in the sense that a man comes out. Jacob is going to meet his brother Esau, who he tricked into getting the priesthood and all the wealth of their father Isaac. Tricked him. And so he always felt bad about that, and he wanted to mend fences with his brother. So he creates a caravan with flocks and herds and gold. He's going to pay him off. He's going to say, look, I'm sorry I took all the wealth. Here's a whole bunch of wealth to show that I feel bad about that and I want my brother back. And he's going down. But now Esau's a warrior. He's a warlike guy. Where Jacob is more cerebral, Esau is a man of action and a fierce warrior. And he's going down and he takes his caravan and he splits it into three. And first he splits it into two caravans. And he puts Leah, his first wife, in charge of the first caravan. And the idea is that if Esau is not going to be pacified, he's going to take the wealth anyway and kill Jacob. Jacob will have a little bit more time to get away if he's in the second caravan. And they travel a little further, and then he decides, well, you know, Matt, maybe I need another caravan, split that caravan up and make three caravans. He puts Rachel, his second wife, who he really loved, in the second caravan. And she's in charge. So now there's three caravans, and he's in the back of the third caravan. And they're crossing over the Jabbok River. And the Jabbok is the main tributary of the Jordan. And as they're crossing over the Jabbok, he comes to the river's edge. He's the last one in line. And he can't come up with the courage to cross over the river. He's not crossing over. And he's stuck right there at the river's edge. That's the fording place, Penuel. And the Bible says a man comes out and they wrestle. And as they're wrestling, they wrestle all night. The angel or the man is trying to get him to cross the river, but he's fighting as hard as he can not to go. He's fighting this man. And finally, the angel or the man turns around and says to him, let me go, the day breaks. And Jacob goes, I'm not going to let you go unless you bless me. So Jacob kind of knew he was dealing with someone not of this world. Bless me and I'll let you go. So as they're wrestling, the angel or the man grabs them in the hollow of the thigh. That's interesting, isn't it? The hollow of the thigh. Well, where is the hollow of the thigh? I had to consider that. I wrestled in school. So I'm going, the hollow of the thigh is where the buttocks, the bottom of the buttocks and the top of the thigh meet. There's that hollow space, and it's a handhold. So if you're wrestling with somebody, you grab him on the hollow of the thigh, and that's where he's grabbed at the hollow of the thigh, which makes it, the connection is with Abraham. Abraham is going to send his head servant. They don't tell you his name. I believe it's Ezekiel. I'm not sure if it's, no, I'm not sure. His head servant, and tells his head servant to swear, and to swear that he will find Isaac the proper wife, and to swear to put your hand under his thigh, to swear. And now I'm looking around to see, what does that mean, under your thigh? Why under your thigh? Well, it turns out, I inquired internet, I inquired, and I have, my last editor was a 16th generation rabbi. Not a rabbi, he doesn't like to say that I call him a rabbi, but he's an Orthodox Jew. And so I call him up and I go, Gary, why under the thigh? And he says, because that's the closest you can grab a man without touching his seed. And it was about the posterity. So when you swear by holding under the thigh, because it would be the hollow of the thigh, you're swearing by their posterity. Either their posterity or your posterity, the future. You're blessing that or using that as leverage against what you need to do. So when the angel is grabbing him, Jacob, on the hollow of the thigh, he's blessing him. And so Jacob turns around and goes, I won't let you go unless you release me. And the angel turns around and says, what's your name? And he says, my name is Jacob. And the angel turns around and says, it's no longer Jacob, it's Israel, because you have prevailed against man and have found favor with God. So that was the blessing, because he's holding him at the hollow of the thigh. A lot of the Jews believe that it was holding on the hip, because he limped after that forever on his hip. He was lame after he wrestled the angel, for he had forever limped on his hip. But it wasn't, there's no handhold on the lip. It was, I'm real confident that it was in the back of the thigh, and it all connects with that. And then Jacob asks the angel, what is your name? And the angel goes, well, what for do you ask me that? And so it's not answered, but I believe, and I have it in the novel, the angel does answer and said, why do you ask me that? For it's the new name that only can be uttered at a certain place and time. And the Bible doesn't say, all the Bible tells you about that is that he says, why do you ask me that? And there's no answer to that. So after this incident, what happens is that Jacob is kind of scared again, because he says, I've seen the face of God. I've seen the face of God and live. And it's always been that no man could see the face of God and live, because the magnificence is so like looking into a atomic bomb kind of deal. You would literally evaporate because of the intensity. So no man could look at the face of God and live. But he sees the face, and he says, I've seen the face of God and live. And he called the place Penuel, which means I've seen the place of God and live. That's where it gets his name. Recently, someone told me it also means I accept God. That's just something new I heard, and it fits a certain parameter. It didn't seem like he accepted a lot when he refused to let the angel go. So now Gideon is also going to cross over the same place at the Jabbok River, which is the main tributary of the Jordan, except Jacob was going south to meet Esau. Oh, someone told me just yesterday, Esau, I had a medical procedure. Esau means Jesus. How do you like that? I had no idea. I don't know if that's correct or not, but this is what the lady told me. I think she was a Muslim. So they were at the same place, and Gideon earlier, and that's why there's a tower there. You know, there's this big gleaming tower that they're real proud of. It's on the exact spot that Jacob wrestled this angel, on the north side of the Jabbok River. There's this tower, and the place is called Penuel, where this town is, the town of Penuel, and they have a tower, which I had mentioned. Gideon comes and eventually wrestles down the tower because of the town's unrighteous behavior towards him. He's starving, they wouldn't give him any food, and that was his threat when he came back, and he kills all the men there. They were close to starvation at that point, and they had a long way to go, but he was determined. So Gideon turns around and earlier on, I think it's in chapter 6 or 7, he comes across an angel. And the angel, he's in the wine press or the threshing floor, and he's hiding grain with his father from the Midianites. They're like a plague of locusts. They eat everything, right? And they're worrying about food, and they're in a place called Ophrah, which is their town. And he leaves the threshing floor, the wine press, and he goes out, and under a tree, there's an oak tree there, and there's a rock, and on the rock there's a creature, there's an entity, and he comes to understand it's an angel. It's got his staff, and he blesses Gideon, and he said he tells Gideon he will conquer the Midian Empire as if but one man. So Gideon realizes that this is an angel, a messenger from God. And he blesses them, and Gideon brings a sacrifice, and he uses his staff, and he touches with the staff, and the power of God, fire from God comes down, and that, the sacrifice and the creature and the being go up in a puff of smoke. And of course, now Gideon's, in his demeanor, he's concerned, he's afraid. And he's afraid because he says, I've seen the face of an angel and live. Well, this is kind of a curious event. One sees an angel and says, I've seen the face of God. He sees an angel and says, I've seen the face of an angel and live. There's no understanding that if you see the face of an angel, it's so overwhelming you're going to die. And I believe all archangels, their names end in E-L. You ever notice that? Michael, Gabriel, Rachel, Raphael. And El is another in Hebrew for God. Like in Arabic, it's Al is God. In Hebrew, it's El. They're all El. They're all part of God. And I believe that all the archangels were with God from the beginning. You ever notice how long married couples start looking like each other after a while? I mean, we laugh about it, but there is something to that. And they seem to like mimic their facial expressions. They finish each other's sentences, and they're just so close, intertwined for being that. And I believe with the archangels, they were with God from the beginning, and they've adopted his demeanor, his attitude, his emotions, his physical appearance. So when you see an angel, you see the face of God. I believe. Now, this is just me saying my interpretation, but it kind of fits of that both statements. And here's another little tidbit. Gary, who told me about, or Jerry, I think it was Jerry. Jerry told me about the hand underneath the thigh. And I'm confident that because I was a wrestler, and I called him up and I said, Jerry, thank you so much for telling me about that. I searched Google, I searched the Tanakh, I searched the Hebrew Encyclopedia, the Midrash, which is the historical accounts of rabbis, and no one had what was underneath, why the hand goes underneath the thigh. My church, there was always a confusion. So I said, thank you so much for telling me that. I said, nobody knew, or I couldn't find anybody who knew. And he turned around and he said, no, Joseph, he said, I never told you that. So I asked him like 3 times. I pressed him. I was on the phone and I described, he says, no. And finally he said, Joseph, you know why I didn't tell you that? I says, why? He said, because I didn't know that to tell you. And this is sometimes how God works in people's lives when you're doing his work. And the work is done to prove that there is a God in Israel. So thank you so much for letting me be your guest in your home. And I hope this was entertaining as well as enlightening. All glory goes to God. Have a great day. God bless. Shalom.